Hello, my name is Mohammed Alkazab.
My name is Glorianis.
Hi, I'm Frida.
Hi, I'm Wendy, and today we will be talking about the Victorian era.
The Victorian era is a period in British history between 1837 to 1901, in which Queen Victoria ruled, making her the second longest ruling British monarch. The era was a period of major social, economic, and political changes. Queen Victoria ascended to the throne at age 18 on June 20th, 1837, and she served until her death at the age of 81 on January 22nd, 1901. Her strict ethic and personality has become synonymous with the era. During Victoria's reign, Britain expanded its imperial reach, doubling in size and encompassing Canada, Australia, India, and various possessions in Africa and the South Pacific. At various points in her long reign, she exercised some influence over foreign affairs, and the marriages of her children had important diplomatic as well as dynastic implication in Europe. Queen Victoria endorsed the passage of a Reform Act which added more voters to the elector register. Elizabeth Garrett Anderson was the first woman to qualify in Britain as a physician and surgeon. During this time period, female doctors were unheard of in the 19th century Britain, and her attempts to study at a number of medical schools were denied. In November 1908, she was elected mayor of Aylesbury, the first female mayor in England. In 1872, Elizabeth Dispensary was renamed the New Hospital for Women and Children and treated women from all over London. As the first woman to secure a medical diploma in Britain, Elizabeth Garrett Anderson paved the way for other women, setting a precedent for aspiring female physicians and championing women's rights. Elizabeth was active in the women's suffrage movement. In 1889, she became a member of the Central Committee of the National Society for Women's Suffrage and became more active after her husband's death.
W.T. Stead was a British editor who was considered to have an influence on how the press could be used to influence public opinion and government policy and advocate to government by journalism. Stead was also well known for his reportage on child welfare, social legislation, and reformation on English criminal codes. One of his famous works was The Maiden Tribute of Modern Biblion, which was a series of articles of child prostitution which influenced the passing of Criminal Law Amendment Act of 1885. His sheer energy helped revolutionize the often stuffy world of Victorian journalism because his papers forced readers to confront truths about their civilization.
Charles Dickens was an English writer and social critic who was remembered for his influence on Victorian literature. Some of his famous works include Oliver Twist, A Christmas Carol, Nicholas Nickleby, David Copperfield, A Tale of Two Cities, and Great Expectations. He also played an important part in the social reform of the 19th century. He used his novels as a way to bring attention to social issues such as abuse and exploitation of children.
So there was an increase in industrial power, such as London Birmingham line opens and initiates the railway boom begins. And that was in September 17, 1838. This is a 112-mile long line, and it's the first one that goes into the city of London, the capital city. So that was very important because it connected the city to suburban rural places. So obviously there was a lot of movements, and many people could move from one place to another, even if you live in the rural areas, because now you have access to big cities like London, and there was a lot of economic change as well.
The Industrial Revolution during the Victorian era affected the English language, creating a more vast vocabulary, introducing new words to describe new technologies. Sarcasm was also introduced during the Victorian era and was used in a lot of English literature, mainly influenced by Charles Dickens.
So reading become less of a privilege. So that means that newspapers and magazines were very common, so the common person can, have access to a lot of articles and essays and poetry and fiction. And there was an increase in people who could read as well. Not women as much as men, but a lot of people could read during this time.
What other significant movements happened during the time period?
Another movement that I really liked was abolitionists to end apprenticeship in the British Empire. This is a social and economic change. And so according to the Slave Emancipation Act of 1833, slaves are required to work 4 or 6 years for their former slaves without getting paid. So they weren't really free.
Abolitionists advocated against the system and their widespread protests to end apprenticeship in the Caribbean. August 1st, 1838, the apprenticeship period ended, in which slave owners received over 20 million euros in retribution for their loss, but former slaves received nothing.
Some big achievements of the Victorian era are the first telegraph, which was sent between English inventor William Fothergill, cook, and scientist Charles Watson on September 17, 1838. The London-Birmingham was the first modern railroad line, and it started the steam-powered boom. On May 1st, 1840, the penny black was the world's first postage stamp that was sold for 1 penny, and it had a profile portrait of Queen Victoria. It was copied in other countries and was used for 40 years. On May 1st, 1851, the Great Exhibition opens up in London Crystal Palace, and it displayed the world's technological wonders such as false teeth, farm machinery, telescopes, etc. It was the world's first fair, which 6 million people visited before it was closed down in October. On March 7, 1876, Alexander Graham Bell was awarded the patent for his invention, the telephone. 3 days later, he made the first phone call to Thomas Watson, who was his assistant.
Queen Victoria was Empress of India, Queen of United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. During this time period, there were many advances in industries, science such as Darwin's theory of evolution, communication such as telegraph and popular press, buildings of railway, the London Underground Tunnel, increase of urban population, and more. Queen Victoria's great influence on the kingdom made her a public figure. Her duration on the throne created the Victorian era.
What is the difference between classical and Gothic architecture?
Okay, so let's talk about classical architecture. Classical architecture was the main type of architecture that was used until Gothic revival architecture was introduced in the 18th century. Examples of classical architecture included Whitley Court architecture and picturesque Italian Renaissance of Osborne House.
But Gothic revival architecture became a very popular style and began to get used more than classical. New England adopted Gothic revival architecture as the national style and symbolized the traditional identity of Christianity. Gothic architecture was also spread in large cities of India during colonization. Some examples of this is the Chhatrapati Shivaji Terminus, the Raja Bai Clock Tower, and the Municipal Corporation of Greater Mumbai.